Welcome to another episode of the Vikingology podcast. I'm co-host number 1, CJ Adrian.
And I'm co-host number 2, Terry Barnes.
And we're back.
We're back. We took a little break over the summer so that you could move to France.
Yeah, it's been an adventure.
Good.
Moving across the pond. One does not simply move across the pond. It was rough. It was, 2 years of preparation and then like 6 weeks of limbo. And then we arrived in France at the end of July. So doing anything in France at the end of July or in August is like, no, we are on vacation. Oh, so
who do I give? Are so uptight. God,
who do I give this paperwork to? Don't worry about it. We do in September. Well, what if I get sick? Don't worry about it. Go on vacation. I don't know why. It's funny. I speak French fluently. It's like my native language. It's the one accent I can't do well. Riddle me that.
Well, I'm glad you're there and you're safe and we're finally back together again. It's so great. I've missed you, even though we still talk otherwise, but still it's fun doing this together. So I'm glad. And today we have the perfect guest for talking about French things because we have Dr. Eleanor Janega, who is, like a Renaissance woman. She's like all over the place, man. She's an American living in London, doing all kinds of medieval and early modern stuff. She does podcasts and TV, and I know her through medievalist.net and our friend Peter and I, as some of you know, started the online courses thing, and Eleanor teaches for us, I think, our most popular class. And that's only because it has the word sex in it, probably.
Probably.
And CJ's now going to teach a class for us as well. But anyway, so you're a medievalist historian and you specialize in all kinds of interesting stuff. So like sex and gender, like I just mentioned, but propaganda, that's interesting. And apocalypticism, which is an interesting word to say. But you've also written a couple books. You've got The Once and Future Sex, Going Medieval on Women's Roles in Society, and then also The Middle Ages, A Graphic History. People can find you on yourname.com. And we'll put links to stuff. But you also co-host a couple of podcasts. So you've got Going Medieval, which is very popular. And, hopefully maybe someday we could repay the favor here and appear on your podcast. That would be fun. But Going Medieval, and then also We're Not So Different. So one of them a little broader about the Middle Ages, the other one a little bit more towards politics and stuff, which is, I'm wondering if you're going to find a lot of interesting analogies to the Middle Ages and feudal systems to politics now.
Can't see how it's relevant. Yeah.
But you also, History Hit. This is like kind of the main reason why I reached out to you too, because people will find you on History Hit, which is also very popular. And you recently did this year a series on the Normans, which as people who listen to our podcast or watch it will probably know, hopefully, that the Normans started out as Vikings. And so here you are. And yay, welcome to Vikingology.
May I interject with just one little additional thing I want to add to this introduction? There must be something magical about the name Eleanor because you're our second Eleanor, and I think you're up there in the celebrity status with the other Eleanor of the most celebrity people that we've had on the show. And I watched your documentary on History Hit about the Normans, and I like to hang out in the comments section because they're fun. And seldom have I ever seen so much love for another human being than in the comments section for your history. People were saying literally just, it's Eleanor Janega. I'm just going to hit like. I don't have time to watch this right now, but I'm going to hit like. It was just that comment after comment. I was like, this person has cultivated like a huge loving audience behind her. I think that immediately just spoke to me of like, this is a very serious person. This is a great guest to have on our show. So I'm in awe. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, I think that there is something I will say about the name Eleanor, because it's just, I think there's a nominative determinism at work here, where like I got named after, I'm a joint venture actually, Eleanor of Aquitaine and Eleanor of Castile, and there's a lot of Eleanors in medieval studies, and although it's an interesting one, because like growing up in the States, the fact that I was named Eleanor when I was like, you're being crazy. You don't name children that. That's a name for like your great grandmother who's dead. And now that I moved over to the UK, Eleanor's are, a penny, a pound. Yeah, you can just have as many as you want. But yeah, I still think that there are a lot of us who show up like skulking around in the medieval stacks. I will say that.
Nice. Awesome.
Well, Eleanor of Aquitaine is I don't know if she's the most famous, but she's not somebody to wag your finger at. I mean, she was incredibly influential, influential. I love the story of William Marshall. William Marshall, when he was her personal bodyguard, he was wounded defending her. That's just an interesting little detour in the history of the Angevins, right? But
never has one woman been kidnapped so much. It's really crazy.
Yeah, that's kind of the idea. It's like the best knight in the world almost died defending her.
It's like, Christ. It's really crazy. Yeah, like I just was in France filming a show about her for History Hit, so it should be out I think in January. So that'll be good. It's supposed to be like one of 3 in an ideal world. So, but everybody has to watch it, or they won't send me back to France. I'm like, come on, let's go. So.
Well, so I've watched your Norman's one a couple of times, and I was actually just doing it again yesterday on the treadmill to kind of refresh my memory. And I don't know, do you remember like the very first scene, and you are in Normandy, and you're like, the Norman countryside is unbelievably beautiful, but do you remember what you said was the number one most important part about that place?
Oh, I think that the thing that I said was the most important part about it is like access to it's the sheepies. Oh, yeah. It's always sheep. Everything in the medieval world is about sheep. It's about sheep and like the ability to move wool about. That's
everything
important.
On Vikingology podcast is about sheep.
It all comes back to the
inside joke, man. It's the best.
Do you know the difference between the Icelandic and the English sheep?
We have a podcast that will tell you.
Okay. Now I need to go back. All right, that's it. Thank you. Thanks for sorting out like my evening walk listening for tonight, guys. That's going to be helpful. I'm so obsessed with sheep, and it's one of these things where, and sometimes I feel as though I'm a broken record because I just spend so much time talking about how sheep are important and wool is important, but it would be like it's like oil now, I guess, and in terms of importance, and people have a hard time understanding how important wool could possibly be. But I'm like, this is it, everyone is just eyeing up different places of Europe being like, how many sheep you think you could run through here? What do you think? It's just, that's it. Literally,
totally.
Yeah.
I mean, England changes up the whole economy of like kicking the little peasants off and like fencing around the land so they can, the enclosure movement was a big deal.
Yeah. And, basically just to go, and then the English had to go all around the world and look for other places they could grow sheep. It's just like, it doesn't end for ages, Yeah. Like it's all you got to do is go to New Zealand and you can see the legacy is still at play,
Doesn't end until the modern era when they invent polyester and fake fabrics. And then
central heating, I think that's a big one.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true. Well, that's one of the reasons why I wouldn't be good in the Middle Ages, is because my skin does not like wool. I just don't like it. It's just too itchy.
No. Oh, how this is how you know that like evolution doesn't explain everything, because how would you have survived to this?
I wouldn't. In the Darwinian sense, I would be cast out cold from the herd.
We've talked about this, Terry. Like I would have died at 7 because I broke my arm. It's
right.
Yeah, I would have died really early on. I think of strep. I had strep a lot as a kid, and that'll kill you. So yeah.
People just don't realize like antibiotics are like less than 100 years old. So much of human history, you'd be just like, oh, I got a scratch. Oh no, am I going to die?
Completely. I think I would have been like, it'd be like Little Women out here. I'd been like the consumptive sister who didn't make it. That'd be it. So
That used to be my nickname since my name's Terry Barnes, TB. So I had a boss that he called me Consumption. That was my nickname.
that's actually killer. I love that. Okay, going with that. Thanks, Consumption.
So when I was watching yesterday, I was kind of wondering, like, well, lots of things. But how do you determine, was it your idea to do this one, or is this a collaborative kind of thing? Or
this is one that I wanted to do because I thought that it's one of these things where everybody kind of knows about the conquest of England, right? And the way that they tend to think about it is just like, oh, and then there's this thing called a Norman, and here's the important bit, which is when they take over England. And I don't think that anyone really understands what a Norman is. Like, well, okay, not anyone, but I think the average individual hasn't had the opportunity to kind of really sit down and learn what a Norman is. And then from there, I'm hoping and praying, every day. I want to also talk about like the other Norman conquests eventually. So, I'm quite interested in, for example, the Norman conquest of Sicily and that sort of thing. And I think that it's a really important thing to have a look at because people's understanding of the Middle Ages is often really tainted, I think, by our modern understanding of how things work. So there's this idea that there's like an Englishness, for example, that must also map on to medieval England, which simply doesn't exist. And it's like, yeah, I don't know, dude, that's a bunch of Frenchified Vikings actually who are running a bunch of like really, very German sort of people. And there is no kind of like one way of being English, and it certainly doesn't map onto what you think of now. Right. And so I thought it would be really interesting to kind of talk about how these cultures get created, exactly what happens. And also I think it's quite interesting because I'm constantly being asked by people, whether it's about the Crusades, which I would argue are, just another Norman invasion. That's for another time. Or, whether we're talking about, the just Normanness in general. I think that people have this tendency to just kind of think like this is a bunch of French guys and this is the way that they act. And I'm like, they're so different. Like it's so... It is a very, very specific culture, and the way that they become Christianized is very particular. So people are like, "Oh, did the Normans did they Christianize? Was it just a completely a political move, or did they mean it?" And I'm like, "You're asking the wrong questions." And I wanted to kind of talk about that a bit, and also it was a great excuse to hang out in Normandy for a while, wasn't it? So it's good. I'm a really big fan of Rouen, so. Any excuse to go back to Rouen, I'm taking it every time. So, but yeah, it's. I think that it's really important to kind of trouble, I guess, easy assumptions about nationality and how that works in the Middle Ages, because Normandy remains such an important place and so singular throughout the medieval period that I thought it would be great to just kind of talk about that. And I just want to get. What I really want to do with things like that is give ordinary people a chance to learn about something complex that they ordinarily wouldn't have access to. And then, from there, they could take it up and read any books they like and that sort of thing. But if you've got a good grounding, if you really kind of understand the way that these things work first, then that's going to open up a whole world for you, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I the countryside where you were in the different places, it was just like, damn, you're getting some frequent flyer miles going. You're like all over the place there. It was insane.
I slept very little on that shoot. I will tell you, by the end, I was an actual crazy person. We all were. It was by the end of it, we were kind of like laughing so hard we'd begin crying and that sort of thing. But look, did I have to wake up at 4 a.m. sometimes? Yes. Did I also get to see the Bayeux Tapestry by myself? Also, yes. So.
That's one of the things in my notes is just like, as a historian, I'm just like, one of the best parts of the whole series for me was your personal reaction to the Bayeux Tapestry. Because I'm like, all right, if anybody wants to know what it feels like to be one of us, that is it right there.
Like, I fully out. Like I 100% like when I like started crying at a point in time, and I was like, "You can't show this. Like, you can't. Like, get like a cut cut. You're not. Swear to me, you're not going to show the bit where I like cry because I'm just like overwhelmed. But oh my god, it's just one of those things where you study something for so long. I think that like my first ever medieval Latin course, the first assignment we had was like the Latin on the Bayeux Tapestry, and then to like be sitting there looking at it by yourself is something else entirely. Let's just say that it's like looking at a Van Gogh painting or something, right? It's like seeing a picture of it doesn't do it justice because it has so many layers that it's yeah. So that was it was emotional, girl. Like and between that, I think so that and getting to go all the way to the top of Mont Saint Michel. That was pretty special, and it was great. I'm like standing on the top, and I'm like, look at them all down there, all regular. I'm special, but it's so it's for me, it's the best job in the world is being able to like scramble around on all of these things and be a giant nerd and meet incredible people. I really enjoyed, for example, and what I'm really recommending to people now is I think we went to the kind of like Viking park up there as well, so it's sort of like
Normandy.
Yeah, it's kind of closer to
what's it called?
Yeah.
I talked to those guys on Facebook.
Yeah, they're lovely.
Mm-hmm.
Really lovely guys. And like I think that's so cool, and it was really neat. I'm really into our friends who are doing experiential archaeology. I think it's a really cool field of study. So I think
that's
really
the guy
valuable.
that had the boat, right?
Yeah, Ornavik. That's what it is. Ornavik.
Yeah.
There we go. I can remember things.
Yeah.
I know where I was.
Hey, you were dressed up for that too.
Yeah. I love it when I get to dress up. I love a costume moment. So
like, how Marie Antoinette, like, oh, I love dressing up like a peasant.
So good, and it's really cool because they've got like the boats there, and you get to, and they're like creating new ones all the time using the traditional tools and stuff. So like Ornavik is really really cool for anyone who's interested in Viking culture. I do recommend checking it out. I think that it helps if you got French, but a lot of them speak English as well, so it's pretty okay, I think.
Yeah, the newer generation is better about that, speaking English, as going to the store with my wife and stuff. We were at Sephora and the lady there spoke English. And I was like, oh, well, there you go. You don't even have to. I mean, we're still going to make her learn French because the government requires it. But yeah, it's just, yeah. Well, what's cool is, so there's that group. And then there's a bunch all across the country. They're all building boats. There's Bâtard in Toulouse. There's Olaf Dolan in Les Sables d'Olonne. That's where my dad was born. And they've finished. And they're sailing that thing around here and there. And
cool.
Then there's the other one there's a couple in Brittany too. For some reason in Brittany, it's kind of taken off these local artisans. I think what it is it's actually really lucrative to be an artisan in France. So if you can find funding, and then you're a woodworker, then like why not make a Viking boat? So there's a bunch going on here in France, which I think surprises people because it's, when you think of the Vikings, you don't automatically think France. But then again, I argue that, I think the French experience of the Viking Age, and I don't think we call it French experience, but like the Vikings in the Carolingian realm, I think are as active as the British Isles. So it's just kind of fun.
The Seine is nothing but like a Viking highway for quite a few hundred years there.
Right. They're just up
and down. Yeah. And I do think it's interesting because I think that you're right. There is something that makes us, I mean, probably the Danelaw, I'd imagine, but we tend to kind of think about the English as being particularly, the part of the Viking world in a way that nobody else was, which is odd when Dublin exists, for example. But also the French, get it really, really quite badly. And I tend to argue that I think the Vikings are one of the things that precipitates the crisis for the Carolingians, for example. Because like, how are you claiming any sort of access to divine ability to wield political violence when the Vikings are just eating your lunch every single summer, and you're doing absolutely nothing about it, so that I think that really rocks the Carolingians in any number of ways, for example. But and a lot of our really good sources on it are French, I mean, or as we call it French now. Obviously, they're not calling themselves French at the time, but we obviously we do have these English things, but England just has this outside impact on the modern world, which makes it retrospectively we pay too much attention to it in the medieval period, and we should be ignoring it constantly. I'm as guilty as the next person because it's like I have to do a job and English stuff sells, but I'm secretly grumbling the entire time and wondering why we're not talking about the Holy Roman Empire. But that's a story for another day.
Yeah. The Anglocentrism of it all, right?
Yeah. Talked about that a lot here, haven't we, CJ?
Well, that happens when one of your co-hosts is French.
Yeah. I mean, well, it's so bad too because I'm sitting here speaking English and I'm like, England's not that important, she says in English.
Do I have to hold the own for the English then and be like, the bloody French? Damn these guys.
Nah.
Although I don't think that we have to, under any circumstances, hand it to the English, actually.
I learned a term the other day that was fun. It was interesting. So apparently after Napoleon was defeated, then there was a period called the Pax Britannica. So it's kind of this idea of like global peace for until World War I, where Britain really could. And I had to really scratch my head on that one. I was like, who's teaching this? Well, of course, it's the British. But when you think, I was like, who was at peace? Napoleon III conquered Mexico. What are you talking about?
It's like, ask everyone over in India. They're like, this is great, by the way, and I'm not experiencing this as violent at all. Opium War, what's that? Like, oh my God.
Well, then all the wars in Africa that were happening, especially as the German Empire started kicking up, and they're just like, we would like everything Belgium used to own,
It's like, I just, it's one of those things where you're like, peace for whom? I guess is the first question we should always ask. But
well, it's peace for the people you just said, like you standing on the top of Mont Saint Michel, looking down at all the minions.
Yeah, exactly. No, I used to
attitude.
I marked A levels for a few years, and one of the ones that I marked was like Napoleon and the French Revolution, and it would be very funny because you could see some kids get failed by the British school system year after year, where there'd be like some essay about Napoleon or something, and then they would always turn it around to, and I mean, really, he fell because Britain is great. Britain is so, and I'm just like, oh my God, like what have these children been taught? And they, bless them, they never did very well on their A levels, but it's not their fault. Some teacher was out there, messing it up.
I would argue even the institutionalized system of education from the 19th century on. I mean, you're talking about about nationalism, man. It's about
for sure.
I mean, come on, were you a little kid in America? But like, what's the first thing you do in elementary school? Like, say the Pledge of Allegiance and all of that, right? Like, do they still do
like
that?
all of our weird legends about George Washington? It's strange.
Those are fun.
Everybody does it. So, all right. So let's get back to the Normans. Why
do they make such good cheese?
They really do.
A Camembert from Normandy, you cannot beat it. I have one in my fridge right now. It's got my name on it.
I'd be putting that on. I'm a cheese pervert. I'd have that out on the bench right now. I'd have that ripening, baby.
That's my go-to excuse for people that I know that are vegan. I'm like, nope, I can never do what you do because cheese. Well, all right. So, but I think you do a really good job in this documentary of one of the things that I talk about with the Icelanders, right? It's like when the Scandinavians go places in that diaspora during the Viking Age, they do this interesting thing that, a lot of diaspora communities do, right? You're in the process of kind of going someplace new, so you create something new, but you also, like, wherever you go, there you are, right? And so, there's you talk quite a bit about like the mix of, they're French, but not really, kind of, or they still got the little Viking itch in there somewhere. So, so talk a little bit, maybe just for people who don't know. I mean, like, what's the setup of the Normans? I mean, why is there a Viking connection there? And maybe a little bit about, Rollo.
Yeah. So, I mean, first of all, the Viking connection comes from the fact that, as I just mentioned, the Vikings are showing up every summer to the Seine. And many times in very many different places. We all know the famous Siege of Paris, for example. And basically, one year, the Vikings are like, don't really feel like doing the commute. Just not going to do it. Not going to do it, right? They don't feel like going all the way back. And everyone's getting kind of antsy about it. They don't love the pagans in their backyard. But the idea that there might be a France is starting to exist at this point in time, and the king has his eyes more particularly over on Brittany. And he's like, simply, I must access the cider. We've got to do it now. Got to get over there, right? And he is having problems back and forth, and eventually ends up going to the Viking. As much of a leader as we can say there is of the Vikings there at the time, Duke Rollo, and he's like, look, I will make you a duke. Yeah. And you can stay in this territory, and we're just going to cede this territory to you. But you need to be my guard dog, and you have to go and fight the Bretons for me. And also, you have to pay taxes. You definitely are just going to be top of the roll call whenever I need to do any war, anything. And also, you need to convert to Christianity.
And kiss
about
my
it. Yeah, right. And it's hilarious because there's a bunch of legends about this, where Rollo refuses to kiss his ring or whatever, and instead kicks him over and all these things, which are almost certainly legends, right? Because I just think that even a big tough guy such as himself is going to not this is a pretty sweet deal he's just been handed, for example, right? And so he goes, yeah, that sounds great to me, fantastic, I would like to stay here. And he converts, has a big public conversion, makes all of his underlings also convert as well. They all get together at the Rouen Cathedral. They go do this, and they all go, look at it, we're Christians now, and they stay. And I mean, this is where the word Normandy comes from, because it comes from Normandy, so it's they're Northmen, and they're this is a bit where the Vikings live, right? Which is such an important part. And now we're so inured to it, we're so used to hearing the term Normandy, that we just don't think about it as Viking land, which is what that means, right? And so I think that it's an incredibly important thing to kind of get your head around. Now, we don't really know that much about Rollo, to be honest, in that way that you know how the records are. They're not particularly
zero.
Yeah, we know he's a big tough man who does convert. His own literacy is probably hugely at question on this matter, but he does certainly do this really good job of, I guess, he really does make it his business to get involved in the politics of the time, and he essentially is able to smooth over what was an invasion very, very quickly. I mean, it's one of the sweetest deals that anyone ever receives in the medieval period, full stop. So really incredible piece of statescraft on Rollo's part. And actually, to be fair to the French as well, probably the smartest thing that they could do, because you can't be dealing with the Vikings every summer and the Bretons over there and whatever else. And it also basically helps stave off further Viking incursions as well, because the other Scandinavians are man, I'm not gonna fight my way through the other Scandinavians to get down there. Never mind, it's cooked. It's all done. We're not going down the Seine anymore, right? And so it brings this kind of stability to the region that they hadn't been enjoying for quite some years. And I think that well done, everyone, basically on this. It's just proof. People act in the Viking era, everything is just nothing but a series of battles, and that everyone is completely intransigent, and you can't make a deal with anyone. But here we are seeing Rollo make moves, baby, and we frankly love to see it. So
and then tell time frame when is he doing this? When's Rollo?
Oh yeah. Oh, sorry. I'm going to look up the exact date. This is great. podcasting.
This is how we.
It's fine. We want to be accurate, and
Yeah. I'm such an archetypical historian. It's I can always tell you the actual the century, but I can never give you the date itself. I'm the archetypical one. So basically, here we are talking about he lands initially in 876, and so the negotiations kind of end up coming through, and the Treaty of Saint-Clair-sur-Epte is signed by 911.
Wow,
So
that's a
it's,
long time.
yeah. So, because Rollo,
Not young.
yeah,
Not-
yeah, Rollo, he was making himself known for a while.
I mean,
We could just say
it's
that.
diplomacy is a long game, right? Well, what's interesting is so 9/11, and then Brittany was under occupation by what we think might have been a group of Norwegians until the 920s. So
Mhm.
I used to be able to remember precise dates with uncanny accuracy, and then I had children, and
Brain turned to mush.
just complete where it's like, and I just don't care anymore, where I'm just like, you know what, I'm close. But anyway,
Yeah.
so when
It's just
you
all getting
mentioned the
older.
Rollo got invited, by the king of the West Franks, right?
Mm.
At that time, that wouldn't have been with that Charles the
It is Charles the
Third.
Third.
Nice.
Yeah, it's
So
Charles the
then he
Third.
comes over, he says, "Here, why don't you go fight the Bretons for me?" But he wouldn't have been fighting the Bretons. In fact, there's a few instances where the Vikings who controlled Brittany fought with the Vikings who controlled Normandy there for a little bit. I remember
Mhm.
reading, this isn't my area of like focus, but I remember reading that and thinking that's how in control the Vikings were of these territories was. Then they started fighting each other.
Oh God, yeah.
Turf
Oh
war.
yeah, like it's very. It has to be said that the Treatise on Closer Apt really makes it easier for like Rollo and his homies to continue to hang out in Normandy. It also means that this area is kind of also subject to the same kind of Scandinavian skullduggery that we see elsewhere, right? So it's like, their kids are all trying to kill each other. Like everyone's like hiding out from everyone else. Oh, I'm not getting on with my uncle. I burned down his castle. It's all very, it's all very daggers. At dawn, which I really respect about it, which is quite fun.
Yeah.
So it's but it makes perfect sense if you are Charles III. You're like, I can't keep it
Yeah.
fighting all of these various people who are very good with boats,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Well,
he failed to understand what would happen if the people who were very good at boats got very good with horses, though, as well. And then it's like, now you're in trouble. So now they
yeah.
got both, right? It's terrible.
Yep.
It's bad stuff,
Yeah, my students are always like, well, why didn't Charlemagne just send some guys or what, and it's kind of like, even though it's an empire and all that, it's like, we're talking the Middle Ages and it's not exactly that easy to just like muster a few thousand dudes to like and then send them over. Like, this is like a 3-mile-an-hour world, it's
Right.
like,
By the time you
can't
hear
do
about it, they're
every-
gone.
Yeah, exactly.
exactly.
It's like a game of whack-a-mole, they're gone before you get there. So actually, but one of the things you were just saying about, or CJ, you too, about the other Scandinavians being there, sort of brings to mind for me, is there any evidence, because it seems like I've heard of this before, but I can't remember, that, I mean, sure, it's a sweet deal for Rollo, but does he ever sort of backslide a little bit and be like, yeah, I'll take your money and your territory and everything. And oh, by the way, I'm supposed to guard against those people, but nah, they're my friends. I'm not going to really do that.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that ends up kind of happening is that he's very good at following things to the letter and not necessarily in spirit. Right. So it's like, for example, they're like, you gotta marry a French girl. And he's like, oh, I'm marrying her. And then like just continues to have like concubines with, the other Scandinavians. And like, this will continue for several generations, right? Where it's like you marry a French girl so everyone can go, French Duchess, you like that? She's French. Anyway, like we're not having children, like just to be clear, and we're going to keep that going. But yeah, I mean, he ends up oftentimes attempting to, for example, broker his own pieces with the Bretons and be like, okay, well, the Charles, God bless him, was like, oh great, so I'll get him to like fight the Bretons for me, and then this is gonna work out really well. And then basically Rollo's like, ooh, I'll have that, thanks. And then so like there was a lot of territory exchanging hands back and forth, and also there is a fair amount of fighting just among like the Normans themselves in terms of infighting about who wants what land, because they get this huge windfall all at once where it's like, oh great, brilliant, we've got all this land, that's going to be good. And then there's sort of like a difficulty with then amalgamating into a system that says, and now stop, like no more land encroachment, right?
People who have impulse control saying stop.
Yeah, it's like,
Control
yeah,
problems.
it's like, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean I can't take Orleans? You know, like it's just over there. Like, no, stop. So,
Oh,
What can be said? So I went down a rabbit hole one time, but I don't know. I don't think there's that much information. But I remember the name Malahuk, Rollo's brother. So was Rollo alone when he showed up, or is this like brother thing real, or is it just some kind of passing fascination that's maybe Jean de la Falaise made up later? Or
it's really, really difficult to say because basically everything that we know about Rollo, it's kind of stuff that people made up later. You know, like probably, like obviously something went down, right? Like something went down that meant that Rollo needed to like get out of Dodge, right? What happened? We don't exactly know, right? Like so, we don't even exactly know where Rollo is from. We think maybe he's Danish.
yeah.
Maybe, but you know, it's the work on that is so dicey because of what the actual words are. And we do end up settling on this thing where you have these problems with Rollo because of his brother, and that's why he leaves. But whether or not that's just a really good story, it's so difficult to tell. But it's just like such standard 9th century stuff where they're like, yeah, baby, let me tell you a story. And I'm like, yeah, but okay, but is that real? You know, like even down to, you know, stuff like they're just like, oh yeah, his Scandinavian name is like Hrolf the Walker because he was so big he couldn't fit on a horse. And I'm like, just be serious for 10 minutes, please. Like I
I mean, Scandinavian horses were small, you know.
I mean, they are, yeah. Like, but it's, you know, it's very difficult to see what's going on. But on the other hand, this is kind of like one of those classic sort of tropes that obviously you guys know better than I do. But it's like one of these classic tropes. You have a familial fallout. Somebody kills somebody. Somebody dies, and whether or not it's like it's because your uncle did it and you need to flee, or you've fallen out with your brother, or your brother's fallen out with you, or you've fallen out with your father. That explains why you're over here now, right? And these are stories that we tell, but we have to go at the end every single time when it comes to Rollo. But it tends to be. I think that the thing that is important in what it tells us is that he's a romantic figure even in the medieval period. Right. This is the sort of guy that everyone is like, we gotta get our best myth makers on it. I need a pedigree. I need a story where you don't get on with a member of the family. Please choose from a hat, whether it's, you know, uncle, nephew, cousin, father, brother. And I need to know, like, how large was he? Oh my gosh, too big to fit on a horse. Good God. Kicked the French king over, and it's just like, buddy, you know, like clearly this is I don't think that it is unlikely that there was a kind of some familial friction on the one hand, and but I also have such a hard time with anything with Rollo going, yeah, for sure, we're going in on this one, right? Because he's simply too romantic, right? It's too much of a good thing.
Yeah, you mentioned that actually in the documentary too. I mean, where it's like we're so used to just be like, but when was it? Like when exactly was it? And what exactly did he look like or whatever? And you're like, for medieval people, they're like, that's not the point. The point is he was like an awesome dude. That's just the gist. That's all they care about.
Yeah, they're like, this is like what we can come up with for like how, you know, a dude is cool, right? This is like our ultimate dudes rock moment, you know, like this is like a Chuck Norris character for them, right? Like they're like, oh yeah, that sounds sick as hell.
I'm totally going to post in this video episode or this podcast episode. I'm totally going to post those little, what are they, like enamel medallion portraits that you keep showing throughout the thing. And Rollo's is like, did you notice this? Like, is this the world's first instance of side eye?
He's like.
Both of his eyeballs are like
going like just straight stage left. Yeah, it's quite.
All the portraits are like, yep, and this is exactly what he looked like.
And it's so common for medieval things too, where people will just be like, "Oh yeah, he was big," and then they're like, "That's the," you know, like for women, they're always like, "God, she was hot," and you're like, you want to expand on that? No. Okay, great. Thanks, guys. Thanks. You know.
That's like when you were talking about William. Well, we're fast forwarding to William, the son, whatever. But the the concubine or the woman that he sees at the well and like, bring her up here. And then you're like, she's like, no, I will not do that. And then
I
she's
would
like
never,
riding through the front door on a white horse. And I'm like, Guinevere, anyone?
Yeah, it's like every time. And you're like, sure. Yeah. Yeah, it's like Arlette. She's theoretically a tanner's daughter, right? And it's like, no, I would never be sullied by a duke in such a manner. And all of these stories are just so incredibly romantic. And and William is the same, right? Like everything about him is crazy. But like Robert, his father, is an interesting one because like basically you get your Rollo, then you get your Robert. And Robert comes to the throne through there's a lot of internecine violence, I think we could say. So like he's constantly fighting with his uncle, who's the not Duke of Rouen, the Bishop of Rouen. And like, there's a lot of setting things on fire back and forth. And anyway, Robert ends up dying. And William, who's off at Falaise, being a tiny little baby, essentially has to get like smuggled out under cover of darkness because everyone is all like, "Oh, well, screw it! I'm going to like kill my nephew here, and I'll take over Normandy.
Like
That'll be
Princes
fine."
in the Tower preview,
like completely, and it's like and even it's the 11th century, and everyone's like, "Yeah, that's fine. You know how Normans are." Right. And it just goes against what people would assume are kind of like social norms about how everything works, and it does kind of go to show you that the Normans are a little extra. They are a little bit Scandinavian. They are a little bit much less likely to concede that there are things like a definite right to succession, for example. So it's a lot more every man for himself, which I think it's good. It keeps them on their toes for sure, right?
Well, that was new in the Carolingian. For the Carolingians as well, right? I mean, I think it didn't really start in earnest until the Capetians for that, the primogeniture, passing on your lands to the eldest legitimate male heir. I think it was the precision. But because before that, it was split it all up equally amongst, because the Merovingians and Carolingians are like, yeah, you have to split it up equally among all of your children. And that didn't go so well.
Yeah. I think that like neither work very well is the thing. Like I kind of understand the splitting it up because you're like, yeah, let's just nip this in the bud. No one's fighting. Everyone gets exactly the same amount. And they're like, oh, just so to be clear, I'm still going to fight about it. And you're like, damn. So.
Well, it doesn't help when, it's like, okay, here's the division and here's, all right. So son number 1 gets this much. Son number 2 gets that much. And son number 3, are you guys happy? Yes, we're all happy. All right. Council of Worms, 821. And then Dad's just like, you know what? I'm going to remarry a younger woman. Okay, just don't have there's a kid. Okay. And now we're redrawing the lines. I'm not happy. But anyway, that's literally what happened. Are you happy now? No, we're not happy. In fact, we're so unhappy, we're going to put you in prison for 20 years and hold you hostage. And then we're going to kill half the nobility at a big battle in 841.
Yeah.
And then the Vikings show up and they're like, why is everyone dead? We weren't here yet.
Exactly. It's these things are always in retrospect, we all go, oh, well, that's crazy. I can't believe people were doing X, Y, and Z. And it's like, babe, these things are in flux and everyone's going to fight regardless at this point in time because you can, right? To a certain extent. And I think that one of the big stories of the Middle Ages is really like moving away from that and towards a more rules-based order of things.
You think the church plays a big role in that?
Oh God, yeah. Which I think is incredibly true with stuff like primogeniture.
God, right there. Because
oh yeah, that's right. Our Lord and Savior would love.
Oh Jesus.
But yeah, I think that like even in terms of like primogeniture, because like, we certainly see like earlier in the medieval period, for example, like a lot more willingness to accept like women as heirs, a lot more willingness to kind of pass things on, a lot more regional variability in terms of who can inherit what. And as we get further and further in, and the church has more and more control over things, for the church, it's because they're essentially just a legal organization. They can just say, yeah, we want like this one rule. We want it to be men. This makes it easier for us to kind of control where things go, and it makes it easier for us to keep an eye on things. They don't want these piecemeal things, and probably it's not a great look when there's stuff like your bishop in Rouen is like hunting his nephew right now. They're like, oh, I don't love that. Probably we need to call time on that one, right? So there are all kinds of knock-on effects, and also like from their standpoint, it helps crack down on simony within the church itself. So, like moving towards a rules-based order is sometimes good, but it's also like, well, who does these series of rule benefit? Like who's getting the good stuff out of this, right?
Yeah, I mean, because isn't that one of the reasons for sort of the crackdown even on chastity, right? Because you got too many priests and bishops spawning.
Yeah, they're just like yeah.
Like, no, your illegitimate kids that you're not supposed to be having anyway are not in line to inherit church property. Like, come on, we can't do that. You got to stop doing that.
And it's one of those things where I think that because they have this crackdown within the church, and they say you can't get married anymore, you can't have kids, you can't do all of these things. It also kind of helps to have some knock-on things. They're like, no, we're cracking down on everybody. All right, like, hey, it's not just this, and so you see things, for example, like it cracked down with the Normans for like having all the concubines, right? Like for a while, it's kind of like help yourself. Everybody's got a French wife and like 3 Viking women of some description, all of these things. And it's interesting too when you see people talk about the Normans, because like there's tons of stuff like made about like William the Conqueror being William the Bastard before, and everyone's like, oh, because he was a bastard, and I'm like, that does not matter.
Yeah, that's like the professor.
Like nobody cares, it's
that guy you talked to, Deleuze, professor.
Yeah.
He's like, they're all bastards. It's like it's not a bad thing.
It's not. It's like they're like, and in fact, like calling him like the bastard in this circumstance is actually just saying, oh yeah, because you know whose son that is, right? Okay, good. Just checking. It's not an insult. It's not saying, oh, like he's an insignificant guy. It's just more of a statement of the fact that like, yeah, he's a common Norman, and this is the way that we do things around here, right? And it's our own interpretations and our own understandings of how we think that inheritance is supposed to work, or how marriage is supposed to work, that makes us read William the Conqueror prior to the conquering as some kind of like underdog, when really he's just your bog standard Norman. This is what they do.
That makes for a good story, though, then, doesn't it? Right? I mean, I don't know. CJ, you're the storyteller. Like, is that a hero's journey kind of thing? You take the runt of the litter, the bastard, whatever, and then he rises up and conquers England and changes English history forever. It's like, yeah.
I mean, that's your that. What a great call to action! Like, you finding out that that's the movie Hercules. By the way, your dad is Zeus. What? And then that's kicks off. And then here's the world of adventure. Like, have fun, kid. And that's how you could definitely start that. Well, French inheritance law today ignores whether or not children are produced in wedlock. In fact, that's been that way since Napoleon.
Quite right, too.
The equal partition. So if my dad, he listens to this podcast, so I have to be really careful. Actually, no, I don't. So if it comes out that like some Peruvian kid is his, then there's a 33% share of inheritance that goes directly to him, right? Because that's French inheritance law. So better to him than the government.
Yeah, I just completely agree with it. I think it's good. I don't have a whole lot of time for the idea that the church law is got primacy. In the big year of our Lord 2025, come on, calm down. I don't care. I mean, bastard. There's no such thing.
I will say
go ahead, CJ.
This has nothing to do with Vikings, but it does have to do with bastards. But I do have to say I appreciate Mr. Arnold Schwarzenegger, one of my favorite people. Even though, despite all of his thoughts, in spite of all of his faults, because he's done some bad stuff, but he admits to it. But that kid that he had out of in secrecy,
with the housekeeper,
Joe Benega or whatever. He hangs out with the kid now. He mentors him. He does. I'm like, how cool is that? Like, to find out that
it's his kid.
I know. And then for years, I was like, okay, I need to do some research. Where was my mom? She was in LA in the 80s when I was born. How close was she to Arnold Schwarzenegger? How likely is it that I'm one of these kids? I want that. I'm just kidding.
Don't let the French government hear you say this. You just got there, mate. You're gonna go lose lose everything. So
Yeah. No, it's pretty sure I'm my father's son. We look way too much alike.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
So who was the woman? I don't remember her name. That you have a couple of scenes. You're talking with her inside of a church, and she's a medievalist historian, and she was talking about the fact that like we don't know why, whether it's just because it didn't get written down or if it literally like just didn't happen or whatever, but like they literally had no kids with the French wives.
no,
All the kids are spawned by the Scandinavian concubines and whatever.
Mhm.
So it's like, that's super interesting, I think.
Yeah, it's really interesting because so basically it's like you get your French wife in order to like prove a point and say
Right.
that I am literally wedded to the idea of like sticking around in France, like absolutely. But there is this kind of a cultural emphasis that you need to keep going. And it's Leonie Hicks also. Just shout out to Leonie. She's awesome. But yeah, so we definitely see this too. For example, by the time that William the Conqueror gets born, there is a lot of hand wringing because like his Danish isn't great. And they're like, "Ooh, these kids are getting too Frenchified around the place." Like, so you don't really want, from the Norman standpoint, you really want to kind of keep this influence, this kind of Scandinavian influence. And like, yeah, they do things slightly different around here. They are like increasingly speaking their own dialect of French. I mean, Norman at the time is, wild. It's certainly not textbook French. Not that there is a textbook French, but hey, and so but there is this kind of concern about keeping things a little bit Viking, right? Like to the point where they will like send you off to the Danish lands. Yeah, they're like get on out of here and like go get on a boat for a while, and we'll see you in a bit. Or like they'll bring in Danes to kind of like Danish you up a little bit. So we really do see that there is for them a concern with kind of keeping the Northman bit going. Like you have to keep that going, or it kind of loses its panache, really. So it is a distinct culture that they're attempting to uphold, and they appear to have some kind of like blood-based understanding of what that means, I would argue.
Do they call it Franco-Norman? Or what do they?
Yeah,
do they create
yeah.
a hybrid like that?
Yeah. And so it's like, and it's that same old, like whether or not, like, who knows what Rollo was doing or what his intentions were, but like certainly by the time William comes around, that man is Christianized, right? Like he's certainly not a following Odin or whatever. But they are still trying to make sure that he's acting sufficiently Viking-like, I suppose. Because they're like, oh, these kids are getting too French these days, and like you should be slightly French, but not that French. It's like trying to like adjust the dial,
wearing those
right
frilly
level.
clothes and like,
we're talking about the ruling elite specifically, right? So Rollo's invited with his buddies to become the rulers of Normandy. There were people living in Normandy before they were invited. So they inherit land and the people who work that land. Do we have any sense of how many Scandinavians they brought in with them, and then what influence that had on the general population? Or did it remain during the Norman period, pre-1066 England, and maybe even after, did it remain kind of like what happened with William's Norman England, where the ruling class spoke one language, the common folks spoke a different language, and there was a kind of separation, at least for a few generations, before they, molded in to try and maintain legitimacy vis-a-vis the people?
So they actually bring quite a few people over, which is interesting, and we know that there are kind of like levels of the Northmen. Because there are some who are a lot more like raiding still over the borders, and then have to be told like knock this off, right? And that kind of thing. But they amalgamate pretty quickly, is the difference. So we do kind of have the stepped Norman and English hierarchies within England, but Normandy is just a lot smaller place. Right. Like fundamentally, like you are just kind of talking about a duchy as opposed to a kingdom. And so people begin to mix a lot more quickly. And there are kind of advantages to it from the standpoint of the original kind of French speaking Normans who are there, because it's like, you know, a little bit, you get a little tax break. For example, if you're a little bit more Norman, it might be that, you know, these people are kind of like looked at first in terms of if territory does expand and that kind of a thing. So there are certainly more French people who are around who are not necessarily integrating with Normans, but it does happen fairly quickly within a couple of generations, to the point that everyone kind of talks about it in the adjoining kingdoms, where they're like, yeah, Normans are weird. They speak this weird form of French. Like everyone's kind of like, they're picking up some Danish. They're making this new hybrid language that they're all speaking over there. And everyone is like, do you know what Normans are saying? No, dog. Right. Like, you know, so, and it appears to kind of be a cultural thing in the duchy itself, not necessarily just happening at a higher level. Although I would imagine initially, you know, for the first a couple generations, you've just kind of got Vikings who are here now, right? But it's always the same, you know, give it a couple generations and see what pans out. And the answer is, within a few generations, we've got more of an amalgamated culture, whereas initially not so much.
Mm.
Is it still that way, CJ? I mean, obviously all places have sort of cultural regions, and are the people in, you know, the Ile de Paris going, oh yeah, those hicks over there in Normandy?
No, Normandy is very French now. I mean, it's yeah, there's no trace. I mean, I don't know. One time I was with my grandfather at some seafood show down in the south of France, and they had some Norman clients there, and they were both blonde and blue-eyed, and my grandfather was like, "Look, your people," you know, and I was just like, "Okay, sure." So yeah, I mean, and if you go to northern France, there's a lot more blondes, but I think that's more from the German influence and Dutch influence than it is from any sort of Viking. And I think the one region in France, I think, that has the most separatist tendencies would be Brittany, because they
oh yeah, it's
still
absolutely
have
the Bretons.
they still have their own language, le Breze, and then they still have. I mean, they have their own Coca-Cola. Do you know that?
I didn't know that. No.
Breze Cola. Yeah, it's hilarious. Somebody introduced me to it, and I was like, "This is a joke, right?" And they're like, "No. They decided they didn't like Coca-Cola anymore, and so they made their own. And you drink it, and you're like, this is Coca-Cola."
yeah, but it's in Celtic, so
yeah, it's in Celtic,
you know,
with their own thing. It's wild.
I love the Bretons. I love how they're constantly showing up everywhere with a flag. I had a French flatmate for a while, and he was originally from Orléans, but he had a bunch of his friends who were Breton come stay with us, and I'm not joking. They were like staying with us for like a week in London, and they brought a Breton flag and flew it out of our like flat window because they can't go anywhere without I love the Bretons. Yeah. Great group of people. I'd do anything. You know, any Tour de France you watch, it's just like Breton flags at the time. It's so good. But yeah, it's interesting though, because the guy that for the documentary that his name is escaping me, which is going to make me feel like trash because he was so cool. But the guy who worked at Falaise, I want to say his name is Thomas, but I can't remember off the top of my head. And he was brilliant. And I was kind of asking him, you know, I was saying, you know, I wanted to do this because people don't really know about Normans in, you know, the English speaking world. And he was like, yeah, well, that's kind of true in France too. And I was like, come again? And I was like, I would have imagined that it was like, this is fairly important part of like the French curriculum. And he's like, not, because since it like the French curriculum is so standardized and centralized, the Normans are seen as being like not sufficiently French, right? Like it's an insufficiently French story because it is a story about Vikings. And so it's not one that the government in Paris is particularly interested in telling. Mm-hmm. So he's like, I grew up about a 20-minute drive from Falaise Castle. Obviously, I work here now. We never even came on a field trip here because it's like not part of the curriculum. So, you know, like the Normanness and what the Normans were doing is kind of like the Normans have kind of like amalgamated into France now, but it's not without a fair amount of doing that intentionally and trying to stop telling these stories. And I think that that's really interesting.
Yeah. It's similar to Russia, isn't it? Like the Slavic versus the Scandinavian.
Same here. It's the, you know, and I'm in, so my family's from Normoutier, which is in the Vendée, which at
No.
one point was part of Brittany, but they're their own thing, and they're still really their own thing now because they never accepted the revolution. They remained loyal to the king. So you had the War of the Vendée, and then you had what now the people in Vendée call the genocide. Is 9 in 10 people were killed or displaced. But interesting region historically. The same thing. People, I was at the Salon de l'Épine, so Noirmoutier. Noirmoutier is where Saint-Philbert was. It's ground zero for the Viking invasions of France. Literal ground zero. Everyone should know that. Nobody had a clue. Not a single person. They're like, Vikings. Why Vikings? Because they were here. They lived on this island for a while, and they're like, what?
No.
They're like, if the government would just let me in with a metal detector, I could prove it.
Well, and there's a nomenclature issue too, where Normand means the people from Normandy, but it also means the Vikings, Normand. So when you talk about les Normands, the word Viking here really hasn't gotten into the nomenclature very well. So you get all this confusion where people, ah ouais, mais non, les Normands ils sont venus ici. Yeah, the Normans came here. What are you talking about? Viking? No, like in the 1800s, they brought stones. I'm like, what is happening?
No. Oh God, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's true. It really isn't something that's taught in the schools, and it's unfortunate. But the popularity is growing because people are finding out after leaving school about this history, and I think that's driving this really big subculture that's starting to really latch on to this idea of something. And I think also in the general cultural kind of zeitgeist of the day, there's this idea that it's kind of almost like counterculture, if you will. So it's this idea that, to your point, the standardized curriculum coming out of Paris is very very singularly focused. So when people come out, they go, oh, but wait a minute, here's this other rich culture. It turns out France is an amalgamation of lots of different cultures. There's the Bretons and the Basque and I should be able to name more than that. The Aquitaine was its own thing for a while. Is under English control for a really long time. My French grandmother, her last name is Danny. So it's so there's these influences from all over. So it's like the school will tell you like it's French and French and French, but it turns out it's like a mix of everybody. And so then they're starting to discover. It's exciting to see. It's kind of fun to watch and be a part of.
Yeah, it's a big place, France. Like I mean, it's weird to say
it's
that.
Also
like
really
when,
small.
Yeah, exactly. It's like it's big in European terms, and what is going on. Sorry. France is big in European terms, and what is going on in Brest is not what's going on in like Montpellier, and like that's just true. And that's one of the things that's so cool about it. But yeah, I love that there is this pocket that is so Viking for such a long time, and unfortunately, then that means that they end up being English. But but I think also we kind of get that wrong as well. I think that we have a tendency to say, oh well, because the Normans become the kings of England, like Normandy becomes English. I'm like, I think that just England is more Norman than you think. Like, one of my sliding doors medieval things is I think that like had the 100 Years' War gone differently, and all the treaties stuck, I don't think that France would have become more English. I think that England would be more French. Because I think the English kings would have been like, all right, bye. It's like, I just fucked off to Paris, like that's what would have happened. They're absolutely not sticking around up here for it, like it's, and we can tell that just because of their behavior, for the hundreds and hundreds of years previous, where they're like, do I have to go back to London? Are you sure I can't just like hang out in Poitiers?
Richard the Lionheart spent 2 months of his entire life in England.
Oh my God. And people still act like he's like English at all whatsoever. And I'm like, if he wasn't like possibly the worst English king of all time, like he has to be in the running. And like, and he's like, he hated it here. He didn't like you people. He didn't know what you were saying. Right. Like he's like, he had his body divided and all of it is buried in France. It's like, it's either in Fontevraud or Rouen, like that's where it is. He did not want to be around you people, like get over it. Right.
Yeah. Go ahead, Terry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I remember visiting Battle Abbey, and walking around on the field where the Battle of Hastings, quote unquote, took place, and there was like sort of a visible, palpable kind of, those are French tourists and they're really proud right now. It's like this little sort of place where they could walk around and go, we took over here. Like, this is
like, which is very funny because I'm like, I don't know, unless you're Norman, I really think that like the Normans are different. I guess this is like my personal, obviously like my personal team here, but I think it's quite funny because like really the conquest of England, such as it was like Vikings of two different flavors going in. They're like which one will win, the Norman kind or the Danish kind? Like, who knows? And kind of, I think no one was as shocked as as the English when they managed to put down the Danish incursions. I think they were like, what did that? Oh shit! Okay, well,
Ethelstan's like,
no,
yes,
yeah, like never mind.
Did it.
Like,
they're gone.
Like, but I think that it's such an interesting thing because like we certainly see, like, again, just from behavior of people, the William conquers England and he's like, okay, bye, like immediately, right? Immediately he's like, all right, going back to Normandy, goodbye. Like, my friends will stay here and extract the sheep for me.
Take that inventory. Let me know what.
Yeah, all right. Guys, just let me know how that goes. I will not be back. Unless, like, I've got to like harry the north, right? Like, it's unless I need to burn down a city or two. And it's like, and if, just so you know, if I have to come back up here, I'm burning your city down. All right, goodbye. Like,
he is ruthless, though, man. For
oh yeah,
like, like seriously, he did like a whole kind of. What is it? Reminds me of, like Game of Thrones, like the Red Wedding or something. Like, I'm coming in and I'm just killing all y'all. And
like I think you could call the Herring of the North a genocide. In the same way if we call the Vendée uprising, like that ends up being a genocide. Like, the Herring of the North is a genocide. Like, has the North recovered from that? Probably not, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting.
Bad vibes. I'm like, oh, they're so cool. I love them. I love the Normans, and I'm like, there were some genocides. Look, just a few. Like,
everybody has an asterisk in history.
Yeah. Like, honestly, who amongst us?
Yeah, right. Exactly.
So,
oh man.
I have two questions, but they're going to have to be asked completely separately.
Okay.
And one of them is, and maybe we can rope them in the answer into one answer, right? So the first one is, because we just talked about how had the kings of England remained vassals of the French king and the 100 Years' War gone differently, how would that have gone? Would England have become more French? At what point do the Normans cease to be Normans, in the sense that the kings of England stop thinking of themselves as the Norman kings of England, and just as just the English kings? And how does that identity shift affect the relations with not just Normandy and France, but also the French king? And then the second question is, and let's see if we can rope it all into one big one. Have you seen the new show, The Conqueror, from the BBC?
No, I really want to, though. Yeah.
Okay. I have heard bad things about its historicity, but it
makes me even happier when it's bad. I'm like, yes, this sucks. Woo!
And I want to just get your thoughts briefly on that, and if we can weave those two together somehow, for the sake of time, because we're
okay. Yeah. Okay. So in the first place, I'd say I don't know how not Norman they become, because like all you have to do is look at literally any document that an English king puts out in the medieval period, and it will always say right at the top, Rex ad glorum et duc Normanorum.
Yeah.
Like, right. It's like they're like, I'm the king of the English and the duke of the Normans, right? And of course, you put king first. Right? Obviously, you put king first because like that makes you fancy, but they are incredibly interested in what's going on in Normandy. And I think also that might have changed a little bit, but then when you have the marriage of Henry II to Eleanor of Aquitaine, then like when Poitiers gets involved, when you have Aquitaine come in, they're like, oh, I'm suddenly very interested in all my French holdings, which are larger than those of the King of France, right? And you get very involved. French politics happening there. You have rather a lot of kind of refusing to go to England on the parts of everybody. All you have to do is like look at how much work gets put in on Chinon Castle, even by like John the First. Like John the First is like, oh yeah, I like being in Chinon, right? Even though like he's one of our worst kings here in England, which is saying something. But there is a real understanding of their fortunes being entangled with France, and like obviously you also have like lots of trying to weasel out of having to swear fealty to the French king about it. But I think that what you end up kind of seeing is them fighting the idea of a Frenchness more than saying we're English. I think that what they're attempting to say is like, no, that's not what we're saying. It's not. I think you'll find it's got a really disparate culture, and we're spending all of our time listening to troubadours and hanging out here. And Normandy. Well, I think we can all agree is a significantly different sort of place. And it's not the only way that claims are made in the 100 Years' War. A lot of that has to do with Isabella, the she-wolf, shout out to a legend, and the way that they want in. But I just think that they think England is a lot more French than we do, right? It's just that because England was just kind of diverges later, and certainly like in the modern period and with industrialization and things. But I mean, like all you have to do is like pick up a novel from the 19th century that's English, and half the time like everyone just busts out into French for a while, right? Like it's just a really different way of looking at the world. So I don't know that they ever stop thinking of themselves as Norman. I think that though, like Norman remains this thing that is kind of like this essential part of identity that is like it's very difficult for us to quantify because we just do not experience it in the same way. I mean, Jesus Christ, even like Henry VIII is very
That's what I'm
obsessed.
thinking.
Yeah, like Henry VIII is like, bruh, no, I think you'll find I'm down here, and it's still incredibly important. So, yeah, I think that probably like most things, everything becomes worse as a result of Henry VIII, right? Like that's when
No.
Yeah, like that's when we get that. All right, that is it. No, we are not French anymore. No, because also we're this weird kind of Protestant, which helps like create this idea that there is like a special Englishness that is like so different. Oh my God, we're
my
so
favorite
different.
part of that story is like the field of the cloth of gold, man. And he's
Oh, yeah.
down there, him and Francis are all like, mud wrestling or something, whatever.
So
They're
they're
like
playing tennis, they're wrestling.
Yeah, and it's just like French versus English, big time. And Henry's just like a wannabe player, like
Oh, God, he out here just like inventing the most elaborate rituals to touch the skin of other men that you've ever seen. But yeah, I think it's an interesting one. And like in terms of, I would imagine I've not seen the BBC program yet, but I would imagine that a lot of the ahistoricity probably has to do with like this idea that there is like an essential Englishness, or there's like some English thing that you can tap into at that point in time. Like I'm just guessing off the top of my head. And I mean, it's an interesting one because I think also, for example, the way that like Anglo-Saxon gets thrown around in a modern context where people are like, want to use it for racist reasons and not to just mean like pre-Norman English people, like that contributes, I think, to a misunderstanding of the idea that there is like some kind of Englishness. And I do think that there is some kind of Englishness. I just think that, I mean, someone who lives in what is now Lincolnshire and works on a farm is a lot more English than like any of these fancy lads, will ever be. And so, yeah, I mean, obviously we still have a lot of class splits in society here in the UK as well as a result of this. But yeah, I think that I don't really know that. I think that if you like said to, an English king at the time, it's like, yeah, but like, do you really feel Norman? They'd be like, what the fuck are you talking about? Of course I am. Like no one's ever been more Norman than me, right? Like,
which is interesting because when we look at least when I've looked at this, the idea of when did regionalism tip into nationalism and that sort of thing, and England stands apart as one that has literary backing in terms of Englishness. We have the Venerable Bede who wrote about the gens Anglorum, the English people. We don't have that for the French or the Dutch or the the idea that there was an Englishness, and maybe it's because they're on an island, right? The island effect.
I think it's also linguistic. So, for example, we get it a lot. It's complex in Czech history because, like, the word for nation and language is the same. It's jazyk in Czech, and I'll tell you one thing: Czechs are really fucking sure they're Czech. Like, yeah, they're like, I want to tell you who we are not is Germans, right? And they're like these goddamn Germans, and like, and you know, now we'd be like, well, do you mean Austrians or do you mean Germans? They're like, I don't give a fuck. I mean, not Czech people, of which I am one. Me, a Czech person. I hate Germans. I hate Germans. Like, that's, and it's interesting because it's like all you got to do is like go to a place where there's like Slavs who are having to put up with Germans, and they're like, oh no. I'll tell you what I am right now, right? And they're like, it's not a difficult one for them, right? And like, yeah, they might call themselves Moravian as opposed to Bohemian, but they're like, but I'll tell you what we aren't. Just immediately. So I do think that there is also something very specific that comes with linguistic trouble. And I think so. It's like the gens anglorum. That's a big part of it because, you know, they're out here speaking their particular thing, and then all these Danes show up and they're like, don't care for this, right? You know? And the same thing, like when you've got the Normans show up, where they're like, "Is that French?" You know, like, so there are these like really like differing linguistic things that certainly happen. And I wish I knew more about Irish history and could comment on that, but I can definitely tell you that it's at play in places where you have like a lot of hostile takeovers, and there are linguistic elements to it. I will say that. I hate to be nationalistic, but it's just like occasionally you're like, yeah, I don't know what else to call this.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a straight. I mean, you could just go with xenophobia, but you know, it's xenophobia as a result of being like, no, because we're this and you are not, right? Like,
defined more by who you're not than who you are, right? So it's just kind of looking at making the contrast. We're not German, right? That's a good one. So, if we think about the Middle Ages, the Normans, they're not French, just like the English kind of in the 100 Years' War. We're not French. And then the French are like, we're not English. And then Joan of Arc shows up and kind of says, oh, now there's this nation of France, right? She's kind of like God wants there to be a whole France. And the French king's like, I can get on. Or no, the Dauphin. He wasn't even king.
He's the Dauphin is like, that's definitely true. This benefits me, right? Great.
God said it. It wasn't me.
It wasn't me. Wow. It's like, well, that's crazy. God said that.
Wow. I feel
well, I guess we're gonna have to do it now. I guess we're gonna have to.
Oh, I take it back. Now we're gonna kill you because you talked to God and dressed like a guy.
I reckon. Well, it's like this is the Burgundians in English while in out. This is an interesting one. But also fundamentally what we can say about my good friend Joan of Arc is, she was annoying as hell. Right. And like, it's all fun and games. You're like, I love the girl sent by God to create the nation of France for me, the Dauphin. Damn, she's still here. She really believes this and she won't shut up. Right. Like and you're like, yeah, why don't you go, Joan? Okay, bye.
Well, they didn't, because they didn't really like we were talking about. They didn't really care. Right. It was just like, I just want my money. I think of the medieval lords as kind of like, your tech bros who are just interested in making their next buck, and they don't care what country they're in or what people they're and that's where the 100 Years' War gets problematic, because then they're like, hey, let's just throw all the old rules out and devastate the countryside to get at each other. And I think the collateral damage is what rallied people like Joan of Arc to come out and say, we need to, change this. And, there's a whole discussion to be had there, but it's kind of along those lines of, when the tech bros get too far out of hand, then the rules that they're governing themselves with break down, and that's where you start seeing some weird, quirky changes start to take place.
I think that this is really apt. I love this tech bro thing, because I think that also is a really great way of understanding it. When we're like, oh, do they see themselves as Norman? Do they see themselves as English? They see themselves as rich and powerful. So borders are nothing to them other than like annoying.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, the
And
proof
like,
is in the fact of what they do to her, right? I mean, once they've
Mhm.
achieved what she gives them, then they just throw her under the bus.
Mm-hmm.
They don't care. She's
As long-
disposable.
As long as they have their sheep.
yeah, must have my sheep.
All right. Well, I don't know. Did we ended with what, England?
Yeah, I guess I don't like. I'm like, let's talk about Joan of Arc. She's a lot like Vikings. Anyway, bye. Like,
Yeah.
just, but it's. I
Tech
guess
bros,
it's
tech bros.
tech bros. Yeah, I think that it is a good way of kind of looking at Norman rule. Is this sort of like move fast and break things tech bro culture? I really like this, CJ. I'm gonna cogitate on that and think about it. And kind of seeing yourself as this entirely different thing to whom rules probably shouldn't apply.
Right. That's
That's it,
Yeah. Rollo's literally just, kind of that like up and coming tech bro who just got promoted to be CEO of X. And then he goes off and starts his own little VC on the side that's like AI powered, whatever. And he's going to have his, what did South Park do? They said microdosing ketamine.
Yeah, exactly. Like R.I.P. Rollo, you would have loved ketamine.
Yeah. And then it's just like, oh, you know what? And now my little side hustle AI is so big and has so much money. I'm going to go acquire this other tech company over in England, and then just start. Yeah, it is. I don't know. I just made that up on the fly.
You're cooking with this
bros.
one, CJ. This is good. Yeah,
just the tech bros. It's pertinent. It's topical.
Right. Well, CJ, that's why what we've talked about before, because humans only do like 5 things. Right?
That's true.
Pick a point in history, and you're going to have the same story. It's different names.
True. Absolutely true.
We did not evolve.
So what's next? What's next in your world? So you just recorded something for History Hit?
Yeah, so I just did 2 things for History Hit. So one should be out in November, which is on Joan of Arc, which is why I've got her on the brain, and the other one should be out in January, which is on Eleanor of Aquitaine and Henry II. I'm currently writing my next book, which I don't think will be out till 2027, if we're being honest, but it is a more wide-ranging discussion of ghosts and how we use ghost stories as a form of social control. So it's nominally called The Unquiet Dead at the moment, and we're going to see what we see about that. But it's going to be fun doing some ancient stuff in that, working up into the Enlightenment. So check out that eventually. But then, otherwise, you can find me at We're Not So Different. You can find me at Gone Medieval. You can find me crying because I need some sleep. That's where you'll find your girl. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we should, we got to come on Gone Medieval, man.
Yeah, I need to drag you both over. This is going to be great. Pick your poison, and I'll bring you over. It'd be great. Yeah.
I think we're in the same. No, you're. We're in the same line. What is that? Longitudinal, latitude? I would get confused.
Yeah.
I'm right under you, but I'm an hour ahead.
Yeah, exactly.
Double daylight savings time.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Although I got to say, when I was just down in France, I was like, they have it so right about the time, and we should really be on the same time as France. I was like, it's the sun has no business coming up at 4 a.m. in June like it does here. It's hideous. It's a really terrible time to be alive every June, but there it is.
It's true. I get up at 6:30 now, and it's still pitch black, and I'm like, well, this changes.
I want that for me. Oh.
All right. Well, thank you so much for agreeing to come and talk to us. This has been super fun.
Thank you so much for having me. I've had way too much fun. I've talked about way too much disparate things, but thanks. I love the podcast and so happy to be here.
Thanks.